You did it. You went to therapy, you named it, you recalled it, you analyzed why that's driving your behavior today. You released it. At least that's what it felt like. And then one day it hits you, a smell, a tone of voice in your partner or children, the way a colleague or maybe even an authority figure in your workplace comes at you. And your heart starts racing and you're right back in those patterns before your mind can even adjust and start to take on those tools that you did in therapy. This is not a sign of failure. I promise you, it's not. It's a sign of your body showing you that next place, maybe that next memory that is needing your attention and needing the next step for your evolution. And this is in yoga what we call a memory recall or a smriti. And we start to bring that in alignment with our wisdom. So that's what we're here to talk about today, memory, and talk about it in this process of transforming. Welcome there. I'm Holly Sin, and this is Heart Mind with Holly. I'm really excited to have you here where we start to break down somatic healing through yoga, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine in regards to more yogic practices, and then also pairing that with some Western science. Today, we're going to talk about memory and the importance of memory as we start to transform and evolve into ourselves. The Sanskrit word for memory is smriti. And I have it written out here, smriti. But smriti really always did, for a very long time, include somatic memory. Whereas in the West, that's kind of a new idea or new thought. It was always thought of in the headspace, in the brain, in the thoughts. But with smriti, it said even that you have the smriti, the memory of your grandmother, for example, in your face. This next concept is always so hard for people to get with Ayurveda, and a lot of people don't believe in. It's okay. That's all right. And there's going to be a lot of questions and resistance and pushback against this statement. But in Ayurveda and in yoga, the physical body is just a manifestation of your mind. So it is your mind. And in fact, they would say your subconscious mind. So what you are kind of operating on under the surface, and what your mind is thinking about under the surface versus the analytical day-to-day kind of mode of operandi to analyze and be in the world and interact with the world. It's what's running in the background. And we've inherited that with our body. And if we want to look at our subconscious, it's said to look at the body, which is really interesting when we think about pain and when we think about how we treat our bodies, maybe again, subconsciously. Why this is important with memory is because so much of our memories are stored in that subconscious storehouse. And so you can think about, and that's often why it's called storing the memory in our bodies. It's holding the subconscious in the cells. I think the most powerful question that we can bring forth as practitioners of yoga, breath work, is when is the memory going to be useful for my growth? And when is the memory no longer useful for my growth? And what is the purpose as we bring forth that memory? And so too, it is important as we go into the body, like, is this a place where I'm needing to go into for that next step of evolution and understanding myself, my family, my purpose, and how to support and work in the world? Or is it this trap that's going to lead me back down some holes, or some rabbit holes is what I was thinking of, but some loops in my nervous system where I'm going to continue to feed myself negative thought patterns about the world, myself, my family, and what it's like to try to serve in this world. So that's our guiding question today. When is a memory really useful? Which a lot of times it is when we think it's not, which is confusing. And when is a memory keeping us from doing the transformation that we need and that we want to really evolve? And oftentimes it's a memory that we circle around a lot, sometimes can be the very trap of keeping us from evolving. That's very, very confusing, right? This path, it's almost again like we feel lost in the forest. I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath. I do that on this show because I know that we're all sitting with that question if not daily, quite often. What do I keep in my memory and what do I let go? And what can I let go? And if I can't let go, why not? When the yogins were talking about Smriti, they weren't just talking about a storehouse of painful experiences, as we know, also really beautiful experiences, but it's actually a storehouse of accumulated experiences. And there's this minefield I've talked about, chitta. It's impressions, impressions like a thumbprint, but the impression can be very, very subtle and very, very brief, like the impression of an experience, an impression of an experience of another person. I've mentioned my children. You put an impression on me in just this moment with your smile or with your bravery, your courage. You've put impressions on me. And so this minefield of chitta is all your lived experience. And if you chose, if you so chose, the lived experiences in your DNA. So with your family, intergenerational passing on of mental material. And so the smriti is the faculty that starts to recall and go back into the chitta impressions and bring forth those. Okay, so it is the faculty that is quite discerning about what to bring forth. And when it does bring forth, it's not just in the headspace again, it's bringing forth within the body, within the somatic experience. Remember, smriti includes the cells, the intelligence of your cells, not just this idea that we have of our intelligence being in our thoughts. When that is at its highest function, smriti, when it's really at its best, it is utilizing prajna, which is wisdom derived from lived experience, not intellectual experience or what you've learned in a book, learned from a professor, not something that you learned from someone else, but something that you know through your body, through that experience, through the emotional experience of your system. Something you know because your soul lived through it. The problem is never smriti itself. It's not the memory that's the problem. The problem is when we experience trauma, we start to lose and obliterate a sense of self, and we start to obliterate that sense of wisdom. So there's an impression, and the wisdom self, which in yoga is called the buddhi, is able to discern that impression. And when the wisdom works with smriti, it's also recollecting things to help in that moment. So you're drawing on a memory to remember what the species of that tree is, to talk about the tree is one example, right? But when trauma comes, that we start to, right, doubt ourselves, the intellect is shattered, or that sense of self. When I talk about intellect, I'm talking about the sharpness of discernment for ourselves and the betterment of ourselves and all. When that gets shattered and we're unsure, uncertain, then the memory is uncertain about what to recall and for what purpose. And so it keeps bringing back the trauma memory. Partially, it's doing that to meet that wisdom, and partially, it's not connected to wisdom. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And so it keeps doing it, thinking that it's trying to help you survive, trying to help you process, but it's actually, it feels like it's really harming you, right? Because you're in high anxiety or you're in depletion all the time. And it doesn't feel like it's actually serving you. And then you start losing faith or trust in your body or your mind. And it's incredibly painful. It's incredibly isolating. Ayurveda actually has a word for this, and it's called the crime against your wisdom, or against wisdom. And it's when your body and your mind starts to not trust your own intelligence, your own wisdom. And it's through the unprocessed accumulation and unprocessed accumulation of experiences. What we're doing with our trauma transforming work is we're not trying to erase the memory. And the trigger is not going to go away through erasing the memory, but actually meeting that memory with wisdom, with our wisdom self, with our consciousness, and bringing those back into harmony. The wisdom, the impression, and the memory. The faculty of memory of when to recall it and when not to recall it, why to recall it and why not to recall it. So truly, we're trying to give that system a harmonious relationship so that you can have the power back in your mind. And particularly, and this is why it's talked about so much with massage therapy and physical therapy, the fascia. The fascia is this really dense, incredibly intelligent tissue. And that's often where we say we're going to get stuck, or memories are going to be stuck, because it's holding the armor of those dangerous moments. It's holding the memory of those dangerous moments, and learning how to armor our heart, learning how to armor our bodies in certain places, in certain ways. And so that tissue is really going to respond to our minds. And so, as they say, your body is keeping the score, your body is keeping record, your fascia is alive, it's part of your mind and responding. Here's the thing with Smriti and trauma. When we get into the freeze, fight, or flight loop, where that's where we're at, and small reactions or small things that happen in those big reactions, what happens is that very thing is happening to the intelligence of our Smriti. So our memory freezes. And that's why we have the sense of being stuck in a memory that keeps coming back and coming back. Or we're running away from the memory, whatever kind of response we find with that trauma. And I've had all three, depending on the trauma: freezing, running, and fighting. You can have multiple responses to different traumas. And then the memory kind of gets stuck in that same method of working with it, because that's where the intelligence is. So we have to start to build our trust and intelligence in memory again. Because if we don't, we're going to keep living in the past. And we're actually allowing that memory to feed into our behavior today. We're allowing that memory also we start to feel victim to the memory. And it can pop up anytime, and we continue to be victimized. Now, I do think with sexual trauma, with a lot of trauma, especially childhood trauma, we were victims. But if we continue to keep the memory in the dark, if we continue to keep exercising the memory without any wisdom, then we're going to be continuous victim to the memory. The first step of building the Smriti is starting to trust the memories a bit more. But that can feel really isolating. You can feel really alone with it. And there's lots of really big emotions that can be tied to it. The memories that really sear into our consciousness and make that biggest impression have the most emotion to it. And it doesn't matter if it's, good emotion or bad emotion, as we might see it. And someone's good emotion might be someone else's bad emotion. So it's relative. But we will have big emotions attached to memories that continuously come back. And that can be really confronting and feel really lonely sometimes. That's why we go see a guide. We go to some type of either therapist or coach, or someone that can help us move through the woods of the memories. One of the things that they say with habit building and trying to get out of addiction with yoga and samskara, which is patterns of behavior, is that we need the memory of the old samskara. We need the smriti. We need the memory of how we used to do it. And so bringing more consciousness into how we used to do it helps us move into the new pattern or the new way. And that is one of the key ingredients to creating a new habit. So the very first step, I don't care what the memory is, whether you're in the excess of expressing that memory, feeling that memory, it's coming to you a lot, and maybe you're even stewing in that memory, you talk about it a lot, or it's really present, or whether it's you're avoiding it, you're not seeing it, you're not even aware of it really that much. Either way, the first step is to relate to that memory and start to position that memory in a place of, this is here for a reason. I'm not saying, and I know it can trigger a lot of people with sexual trauma, that, no, it's not okay that someone has done this. No, no, no. But if the memory is coming back, the body is telling you there's something we haven't finished here yet. There's a knowing, there's some process that has not finished yet. And that's what I'm talking about. And trusting the body and the mind, again, over time, often with the help of someone else. There's a reason that memory got seared in, and there's big emotions around it, and it's trying to guide you, it's trying to support you. Now, you don't have to believe that. But I have found it, and with my clients, I have found it, that it's much more forward moving with the memory and with your wholeness to approach the position of the memory first and foremost there. It's here for a reason. the memory. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the act back in the past was there for a reason, but the memory of it right now, right here, is here for a reason with your nervous system and with your whole system, your heart. Here's the next key. So you have to position yourself, the mind in that way, in your frame of mind that way. Breath. This is why breath work is so powerful. Breath is one of the few things that is both involuntary and voluntary. It's part of both parts of your nervous system. And this is why it's so important to come to the breath when we're working with memory, especially. And oftentimes, when we do come into breath work, which I'm going to offer a full breath work technique video next, but when we do come into breath work, a lot of memories will start to just pop up. I just did it last week with a client, and it's like this thing that you never knew would show up today shows up because your body is holding that memory and waiting for that time when you're ready for it. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness and to guide people through. This memory that you weren't sure or didn't even remember starts to come up. And it's not just all bad memories. I have to say, some of them are really good or complex, and some of them are, all of them are revealing yourself to yourself. All right, let's get into a little bit more with the breath and what's actually happening. So when we start to breathe with pranayama, we start to come into parasympathetic, get really relaxed, and then we course the breath and we actually invite the heart rate to lift just a little bit and find balance as it releases. And then you're asking your body, you're asking your mind, what is on my heart? What is there? There's always something there. Even when there's not something there, the numbness is an emotion, is something there. So if you're alive, if you're breathing, there's something there, and you're taking your breath up and down and coursing through your body, asking, what's on my heart? And then as you're doing that, the parasympathetic starts to relax. The vagus nerve is really open and being communicative. Not always, as a memory comes, that might start to shut, but because you've set that base, it stays a little bit open. So there's this balance happening through the breath as you concentrate on the breath. The other thing with the breathing, as you start to breathe a little bit more consciously, the fascia starts to move in the body. Even as we're still, even as we're lying down, where there's soft movement in that deep, dense fascia, especially around the diaphragm and the abdomen. In terms of yoga, we're moving then also subtle material through the nadis. So with breath work, we are creating a physiological, emotional, and mental condition in which that experience can be digested. I want to go back to the premise. When do I know? When do I know whether to go into the memory or not? This is what I've learned through my now 11 years of doing yoga therapy with one-to-one women primarily. I've worked with some men, but working with trauma. Some days it is good to not go there, especially if your body and your breath is not guiding it. If your body and breath are guiding it, it's good to go to the outside of that memory and just check in. If the memory is there, it is there. Now you're having to ask yourself, again, it's that positioning, not only entering, but coming out. What am I needing to know for that next step of growth? What am I needing or wanting to see that I couldn't see then or that I couldn't feel then? And how is that supporting me knowing myself? To keep tethered to intention is super important when we're working with Smriti. And as we start to sharpen our intelligence, and that intelligence is discernment, discerning action, which is what we're sharpening when we're doing our yoga, starting to understand skill and action of thought. As we start to sharpen that, we'll start to understand and use that in partnership, like a marriage with our Smriti, with our ability to recall. So once we process the loop and release the trauma, once we process the emotion, process the cellular memory of that, and you've seen a lot of people maybe shaking to do that, then the memory is still there. Remember, we need the memory of the old pattern, but we get to use our intellect, use that wisdom self, the wise one within us, to decide, is now the time to come to that memory or not? And in what ways would it be useful? And these two, the Smriti and the Buddhi, the wisdom, are in communications around that. as we start to become more whole, as we start to feel more peace and alignment within ourselves, these two start to harmonize. It's like a beautiful communication, like a marriage. The other way some people handle being the victim is in that excess. So it's lashing on the memory, it's expressing that memory without any off ramp and without any goals, without understanding why that is important. Oftentimes, with sexual trauma, that could be standing up and finally saying and feeling that wasn't right. That is really, really important and often a big step every person I know that I've worked with and myself has had to deal with sexual trauma. And to actually stand in that and feel that is quite powerful. And a lot of times, it's not the only message, obviously, but it's a big message. A lot of times, that's where we end up, at least for a session, if not several sessions. And it sounds so easy, and it in some ways, and it sounds so obvious. Of course, that wasn't right. But we've been living in a society where we've been keeping it in the dark, saying secretly and not so secretly that it is okay. And so we're retraining our mind and our body, and we're finally able to stand up in an emotive and truthful, conscious, fully embodied way to say, that wasn't right. And sometimes that comes out imperfectly, and we got to let it come out imperfectly. Sometimes that comes out really strong, and over time, it does just come out really simple and truthfully. That wasn't right. This is a very small channel. I really invite you to subscribe, share with a friend that is needing to hear a little bit about this. If you have a friend that you know has been circling around memories for a long time, if you have someone that you know that's working with trauma, you're not sure about memories, but they're working with trauma. Memories are always a part of trauma, and it's always going to be a faculty that has been affected by trauma, the Smriti. My purpose, my mission is to support particularly women that have gone through this trauma, health, sexual, or relational trauma. This is the work. When we start to breathe, we start to create the conditions for somatic healing and for the body to run through the full cycle of release, releasing that fear, pain, releasing what had happened. When we do that, we're not just healing the past, but we're reclaiming our minds and we're empowering our minds. And the parts of ourselves, our intellect and our body, or the past and the present, or the the victim and the empowered one, or the power one, is no longer in conflict, but are coming into alignment. This starts to help intellect and emotion or feelings stop being at war, and they start to work together for the whole. I hope you travel well, and I hope this serves you. Again, subscribe, share if someone really needs to hear this here now. The next video will be a breathwork practice, which some people might be really longing for some practical guide. And I'm excited to share that with you next time. Travel well, enjoy your yoga, enjoy your prana, and I'll see you next time. Namaste.